As you get to the last assignment for the Essential Studies project, I thought it might be helpful to just have a quick overview of why you're doing this assignment and what it's all putting together. So we're going to go ahead and look at the goal. I'll talk a little bit about connecting with your classmates, how you want to be inquisitive, and how we're going to apply this information to a practical application. It's really important to first of all recognize that we are bombarded with information all of the time, and words have a lot of power. We place a lot of power on, or I should say, a lot of weight on the words of individuals that we respect, individuals that have a background in that area, and also individuals that we know. So, our friends, our family, so forth. What I'm asking you to do is to be a little bit more step back and take a look at what kind of impact the individual has and the words that they're saying. We get a ton of information every day, and I just grabbed this offline and how much we see advertisements. Now, we don't recognize that we see this number of advertisements, but you hear them on the radio, you see them, they pop up. YouTube pop up all the time. That's how we can get YouTube for free. We have to pay not to have advertisements. We have to pay not to have advertisements in our streaming services. So we get them all the time. Now, we don't pay attention to all of them. Sometimes we mute, sometimes we walk away, but nonetheless, we do get a lot of information that's pounded at us. That information becomes ingrained in us. We collect it even though we might not be paying real close attention. So just recognize that we are getting bombarded. And technology has become a way that many of us get our information. If we look at how we get our information, we get a lot on, most often on our smartphone, our tablet, some television, radio, and print. Print has become less and less more prevalent. It takes more effort. We also don't have it as convenient as we do as something that comes up on our phone. And when we're in the classic college age, it becomes more and more a smartphone component. As a person ages, the television becomes a greater resource of information. Just recognize, I think this is important because we do need to recognize how we get our information and what that means. Now, the purpose of this Essential Studies assignment is to basically apply an intellectual inquiry method. And that means that you're going to look at a couple, you're going to have a question and you're going to investigate that question. You're going to interpret some information and you're going to use multiple methods. So that is the rubric that's been designed for this assignment. The first part of that was method of intellectual inquiry. We selected, I should say, you selected and you viewed a film. In that first assignment, you to think about who's paying for it. What kind of ways did they try to persuade you? How did you feel when you watched this? Were you upset? Were you anxious? Were you concerned? Did you look at your own practices? When was that film made? That's important to know because we get more information. Things become research is done, right? That's how we learn about more about in question. What kind of questions do you have? And what was the intended message? So I asked you to think about those things. I want you to think about that as you look for the articles or resources in the next assignment. So you're selecting something you're interested in. I didn't just say, here's the film. So there was a little bias in that, correct? You had some questions about that. And then I asked you to look at something called the CRAP test. And that is looking at how relevant, what do we know about the authors? Is it new? How old is that information? What authority does a person have? So I had a little video about that. So you are looking at an inquiry, and we're going to assess and critique different resources. So that's part of that rubric. The looking for clarity part is you're still remembering, like, what did I look at when I watched that film, right? What's the bias? What's the persuasion? When was it made? When was this discussed? When was this article posted? Who posted it? What kind of value, what kind of background does that person have? And so now you're going to look at resources that support the message and resources that refute the message. And that's where you interpret, and that's using, again, that CRAB test. You're going to evaluate those resources and ultimately make an interpretation and a decision. I think it's might be helpful if you organized your materials in a table kind of format. And that has basically, I asked you to find two supporting, two opposition, the resources, where you found them, summarize the information about the CRAB test, and then identify, okay, is this a useful resource? Is there some bias? What's going on with this? And I want you to really critically think about that. And then ultimately, you are going to, if I go back, you're going to answer question 4, which is going to summarize that information that you've collected. So that's really those first 2 squares. And then I'm going to ask you to apply, which is that last component. Compare and contrast different methods and apply them to your own application. So you are given a research paper. I want you to identify what resources would I use, what web pages, what kind of usefulness do those resources have. And I showed you an example in my own field. And then number 6 is based upon your own work, your own interest, what's a practical application of utilizing this process? And I want you to come up with something specific. You might have to think a little bit, or maybe you can go back and look at, well, I had an assignment, and I'll be darned, I did this method in that assignment, and I had to do a compare and contrast and make an opinion. So that is what this is all working toward, this whole process of becoming an informed consumer, of not just listening to what somebody says, but finding out the information, having a question, being inquisitive, not having an argument, but asking, where is that information? Can you show me where you got that information? You can have a conversation with someone and not pound them and be disrespectful. Ask for resources. Ask for an explanation. Many times people will say, well, I heard so-and-so say it. Is that going to be acceptable for you? Is that enough for you to get on the train? Or are you going to need to find out a basis for your opinion? And that's what I'm hoping that you find from this assignment. Thanks for listening to this, and I hope it helps.